Chapter 144. It really was a lascivious dragon. Han Shuo cursed inwardly and gave the order. The dark creatures that had just been summoned slowly walked out from the surrounding cover, their eyes aimed at the dark elves, planning to plot against the dark dragon and the dark elves together. Come on, come on. The dark dragon laughed lewdly as its 10-meter-long body flew out from the swamp, causing the mud in the swamp to fly and making rumbling sounds. The naked dark elf girl had a panicked expression as she ran for her life towards where Han Shuo, Dana, and the others were hiding. Her perky breasts rippled with enchanting waves, and her slender legs were strong and powerful. Some mud stuck to her exquisite body, but not only did it not seem dirty, it even had a different kind of charm. When the dark elf girl finally reached the area where Han Shuo and the others were guarding, Han Shuo gave the dark creatures an order. A dozen zombie warriors, a few dozen skeleton warriors, and a few ghouls suddenly walked out from the cover, charging towards the lascivious dark dragon in a grandiose manner. At the same time, Han Shuo called out, and the forest troll warriors stayed where they were, while the troll hunters threw sharp spears and javelins at the dark dragon that had just flown into the sky. The dark elves naturally didn't let their guard down. Almost at the same time, they shot a sky full of arrows, as well as some dark elf magic, at the dark dragon. Damn it, it's you lowly races again. The dark dragon roared and opened its mouth to spit out a fierce flame. There was indeed lava mixed within, and it looked extremely powerful. Retreat! Han Shuo shouted, and under the old priest's shout, the forest troll quickly retreated. A fierce flame sprayed where it had just been, instantly setting the dry weeds on the ground ablaze. All sorts of spears and javelins, as well as the dark elves' arrows and magic attacks, landed on the dark dragon's sturdy body, but didn't have much effect. The attacks aimed at the dark dragon's neck, eyes, and head were all deflected by the dark dragon's iron claws, landing on the other side. The dark dragon's enormous body flew through the air, arriving above the zombie warriors and skeleton warriors that Han Shuo had summoned. Its iron claws suddenly pressed down, crushing the skeleton warriors into pieces. The zombie warriors were also torn apart when touched by the dragon's claws. As expected, they could only be used as cannon fodder. The dark dragon's strength was within Han Shuo's expectations. Han Shuo didn't feel any heartache as he watched the dark creatures disappear in droves under the dark dragon's attacks. He winked at the old priest from afar. The attacks of the dark elves kept appearing, and the magic archers in the back started shooting icicle-like arrows. Some of the arrows even reached the back of the dark dragon's body. As long as they hit something, they would immediately explode, causing a huge commotion and making the dark dragon even more furious. You cowardly and lowly beings will die under the wrath of the great Gilbert today. The dark dragon Gilbert roared angrily as he continued to fly forward under the attacks of the icicle arrows and exploding arrows. As he flew close to the ground, his dragon claws swept up and destroyed all of the dark creatures that Han Shuo had summoned. The dark elves quickly dodged to the back after firing their attacks under Matriarch Dana's orders, attempting to get behind the forest troll to deal with the dark dragon. Unfortunately, Han Shuo had already given the order. Before the dark elves could make a move, all of the forest troll had given up on attacking the dark dragon and fled to the back without a care for their own safety, fleeing even faster than the dark elves. Block the stone walls! Han Shuo yelled out explosively when he arrived at a small mountain valley not far behind the center of the forest trolls. The old priest gave the order, and the forest troll leader gave the order. A dozen forest troll warriors stood on high ground and threw down rolling stones, instantly sealing off the valley and blocking the dark elves that were attempting to enter. Han Shuo had just eavesdropped on the dark elf matriarch Dana's words and knew that she had long since prepared a large number of rolling stones around the valley. She planned to evacuate the dark elves after provoking the dark dragon's rage, leaving the forest troll to fight the dark dragon. When the two sides finished fighting, they would appear to deal with the surviving side. That way, neither the dark dragon nor the forest troll would be able to escape the dark elf's palms. Dana's plan was wishful thinking. If she really carried it out like this, then Han Shuo and the forest troll would really die here. It was a good thing that Han Shuo's hearing was astonishing and he heard all of Dana's poisonous plans. This allowed the forest troll to move even faster and rush to the valley before Dana and the others could react. They used the stones that the dark elves had prepared beforehand to block the valley. What's the meaning of this? Dana finally revealed a look of fear as she snarled at Han Shuo and the old priest through the stone walls. Nothing. I've discovered that this dark dragon is too hard to deal with. We're canceling our deal just now and aren't planning on continuing. I'll definitely return the 2 carts of gold and jewels to you after you've finished off the dark dragon. I'll also compensate you for your losses. I'm really sorry. Han Shuo shrugged and apologized sincerely to Dana. Dana would never have thought that Han Shuo would make a fool out of her at the most critical moment. Although Han Shuo had a sincere expression of apology on his face, his eyes were cold and it was obvious that he was up to no good. How could Dana not see through it? She felt her hands and feet go cold when she thought of her own plans. She suddenly felt her head swell and she was so anxious that she didn't know what to do. Lowly and cowardly life, meet the wrath of Gilbert. Gilbert snarled and spat out thick, acidic venom from his mouth. A dozen or so dark elves couldn't dodge in time and cried out in agony after being covered by the venom. Fight it out with him. A handsome male dark elf roared angrily. The longbow with intricate patterns carved in his hands suddenly swelled as if it was sucking something. The dark elf's originally tall and slender body seemed to be swallowed by the bow as his body quickly shrank. Don't! Dana cried out loudly, her expression a bit frantic. Hurry up and give the order, otherwise my sacrifice won't be of any use. The male dark elf roared angrily as his body gradually shrank to the size of a skeleton. The presence of life poured into the strange bow and the bow blossomed with a faint black radiance, looking a bit sinister and bizarre. Han Shuo looked at the bow in astonishment and revealed an extremely curious gaze. After absorbing the dark elf's presence of life, an arrow wrapped in an inky black gloss magically appeared within the bow. As the dark elf's body shriveled up, the arrow began to exude an extremely dangerous presence. Even the arrogant dark dragon sensed the danger at this moment and charged over irritably, spewing out flames from his mouth. At this moment, the valley behind them had been blocked off by Han Shuo's order. The dark elves could only face the dark dragon's attacks and had no way out. Dana had no other choice now that things had developed to this point. She gritted her teeth and gave the order. The other dark elves stood in front of the dark elf with no regard for their own safety and unleashed all sorts of elven magic to help him resist Gilbert's attacks. In an instant, dozens of dark elves with no way out were swallowed up by the flames mixed with lava, turning into charcoal in the blink of an eye. At this moment, a mournful cry rang out as the arrow finally devoured the dark elf's presence of life. It took aim at the dark dragon and shot out with unimaginable speed, not giving dark dragon Gilbert any chance to dodge. The strange arrow condensed from black light suddenly fell on the dark dragon, then turned into a ball of black air midway, completely enveloping the enormous dark dragon Gilbert. A series of crackling sounds erupted from within the ball of black light, mixed with dark dragon Gilbert's pained cries. It looked like the dark dragon was suffering from inhuman pain. However, as a rank-surpassing magical beast, the dark dragon still aimlessly spewed out flames and venom under such a painful attack. Its body tumbled from the void to the center of the dark elves, where it was wrapped in a black cloud of air, its claws flailing everywhere. It tore apart the dark elves one by one. Even more dark elves died tragically under the attack of the flames and venom. In a few breaths' time, another 100 or so dark elves had perished just like that. The original 300 or so dark elves had now been reduced to less than 100. When the ball of black light dissipated and the dark dragon's enormous body was revealed, Han Shuo discovered that the dark dragon was bleeding profusely from head to toe. Its flesh was charred black, and its movements weren't as fast as before. It seemed that even its eyes had been injured, as if it couldn't see anything and was blindly moving about. Get ready, we're about to become dragon slayers. Han Shuo smiled sinisterly at the old priest behind him and instructed. Chapter 145. Kill that damned dark dragon. The matriarch of the Dark Elves, Dana, was no longer as beautiful as before. Her hair was disheveled as she yelled. Because of the dark dragon's chaotic movements, the dark elves scattered in all directions to avoid him. Occasionally, they would be sprayed with flames and venom. Although she had the protection of the dark elves, Dana was still in a very difficult situation. Under Dana's orders, the remaining dark elves launched fierce attacks at the seemingly blind dark dragon. All sorts of arrows and magic fell on the dark dragon's body, causing the already wounded dark dragon to suffer even more severe injuries. As a super-rank magical beast, the dark dragon's strength was unquestionable. Even the 300 dark elves wouldn't have been able to injure the dark dragon if it hadn't been for the male elf sacrificing his life to pull that strange bow. But now, the already heavily injured dark dragon couldn't see his surroundings clearly due to the damage to his eyes. His enormous body had become a live target, and as the injuries on his body increased, his movement speed became a bit slower, and the power of his attacks wasn't as great as before. The dark elves stuck close to the stone wall where Han Shuo and the others were. Han Shuo, who'd taken in the entire situation, immediately nodded at the old priest when he saw that the dark dragon was on the verge of collapse. "Move the stone wall away, we're going out to clean up the mess." Han Shuo laughed sinisterly as he instructed the old priest. With the old priest's instructions, the troll warriors, who had long since been prepared, immediately started moving the rocks that were blocking the valley. The dark elves had made preparations beforehand to clean up the mess. Not far away, they had specially made a sloping pit. The troll warriors only needed to use a bit of strength to turn the thick sticks that the dark elves had prepared. The rocks tilted downwards and tumbled into the deep pit on the sloping ground. When all the rocks in the valley had fallen into the deep pit, the passage was finally open. Han Shuo's gaze swept across the scene calmly, and he waved his hand to give the forest troll the order to attack. Behind them, rows of javelins and pikes were hurled from the slender arms of the forest troll hunters, whistling as they surged into the midst of the remaining dark elves. Although the dark elves were already prepared, they still howled miserably in the face of the spears and javelins that filled the sky. After a wave of attacks, several dozen dark elves were nailed to death. This made the matriarch of the dark elves, Dana, so angry that she wanted to pounce on Han Shuo. "Matriarch, let's retreat." An old dark elf woman shouted. "Shameless forest troll, I'll get even with you sooner or later." Dana screamed with a sharp voice. She then turned around and gave an order, "Retreat, everyone, retreat." The surviving dark elves fled for their lives under Dana's command. Even Dana herself quickly retreated under the cover of some experts. If he did not remove the roots, the weeds would grow again when the spring breeze blew. Since he had already shed all pretense of cordiality, Han Shuo of course hardened his heart. He shouted at the old priest coldly, "Go after them and kill them all." Under the old priest's command, the troll leader gave the order to attack. The troll warriors that had rushed out of Tanai's mountain whistled as they swarmed out and chased after the remaining dark elves. Han Shuo had his eyes on a dark elf and gave the order to Little Skull to kill it. The Little Skull wielding the bone dagger was as fast as lightning as he passed through the flickering figures of the forest troll and directly chased after the dark elf with the strange bow and arrow. The dark elf who had just exhausted his life had used that strange bow and arrow to shoot a terrifying arrow, causing the dark dragon to be covered in cuts and bruises. Han Shuo was exceedingly curious about that strange bow and arrow, so his eyes had been glued to it all this time. When the dark elf who had exhausted his life had died, the bow and arrow had been seized by another dark elf. Han Shuo had ordered Little Skull to chase after him with the goal of seizing the bow and arrow from his hands. "Awoo!" Dark Dragon Gilbert roared as his enormous body rolled rapidly, causing the ground around him to rumble loudly. When the forest troll around him saw that the dark dragon was moving again, they hurriedly avoided him. Even though he was heavily injured, the dark dragon's strength as a super-rank magical creature was still very terrifying. The forest troll had seen him wreak havoc on the dark elves just now and were deeply afraid of the dark dragon's strength. They didn't dare relax even now. The dark dragon's body rolled as he slowly retreated in the direction of the swamp. It looked like he was going to use all his strength to escape back to his nest first. When Han Shuo saw that the dark dragon wanted to escape, He looked at the fleeing dark elves and immediately yelled at the old priest, "Split half of the people to deal with the dark dragon, the rest continue to chase after the dark elves. Those who chase after the dark elves, don't go too far. Even if you can't kill all the dark elves, you must return in a short amount of time." When Han Shuo gave his order, the old priest only made a simple gesture, and half of the forest troll who had been preparing to chase after the dark elves automatically stayed behind to attack the dark dragon. The forest troll had more than double the number of dark elves. Once 200 of them joined forces to deal with the dark dragon would be injured in an instant and would have a hard time escaping. "Arg! It hurts! Stop fighting, I surrender!" Gilbert yelled loudly as his enormous body slowly shrank under the swirl of black light. Han Shuo started. He hadn't thought that Gilbert would actually beg for mercy. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he raised his hand to signal the forest troll to stop, wanting to see just what the dark dragon was up to. When the forest troll had surrounded the dark dragon's body gradually shrank under the swirl of black light. The dark dragon's body gradually shrank under the swirl of black light, finally transforming into a human form. A tall, slender young man with charred skin appeared, smoke rising from his head and traces of blood at the corners of his eyes. He grimaced in pain as he continuously begged for mercy. "I surrender, I surrender." Han Shuo shot a look at the old priest and pointed all their weapons at the young man. He gripped the demon's lair edge in his hand and slowly walked in front of the young man, saying, "There's no use in surrendering. You have many valuable items on you, including the dragon crystal, dragon tendon, and dragon horn. They're all priceless treasures, and I'll be able to obtain them all after killing you. Do you think your surrender will be of any use?" Gilbert raised his two hands and shouted out fiercely when he heard Han Shuo's words, "No, no, my value doesn't lie in the treasures on me. I can pledge my allegiance to you and sign a master and servant contract with you, as long as you give me beauties and treasures and don't kill me." Han Shuo stared blankly as soon as he heard this suggestion. His mind spun rapidly as he considered the feasibility of this method. "Don't hesitate, think about it. If I become your servant, I can help you kill and set fires, and fly everywhere to help you deal with others. As my master, you only need to give me treasures and beauties to enjoy. This is such a good deal." Young Dark Dragon Gilbert shouted loudly, as if he was deathly afraid that Han Shuo wouldn't agree. He added in the end, "I can make do if you don't have treasures, but I must have beauties to sleep with me. Otherwise, I won't do it." Han Shuo didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at this cowardly and shameless dark dragon. He stood there blankly, not knowing what to do. The old priest suddenly walked up to Han Shuo's side at this time and urged Han Shuo anxiously, "Emissary, agree to it, quickly agree to it. As long as he signs a contract with you, he won't be able to disobey your orders." "Lu Dragon, why must you have beauties?" Han Shuo asked amusedly as he stared at Gilbert, whose body was charred and bleeding profusely. He looked like he was about to die at any moment, but he was still calling out for beauties. I don't know either. That's what my father taught me when I was born. Us great dark dragons must have many treasures and many beauties in order to win the respect of other dark dragons. Beauties are what we pursue." Gilbert rubbed his eyes furiously with his jet-black hands as he yelled loudly, Is this the first time you've left home?" Han Shuo looked at him and asked again, How do you know that this is the first time I've left home?" Gilbert started and looked directly at Han Shuo, asking. This Lu Dragon was actually quite dumb. Han Shuo thought silently for a moment without batting an eyelid and called out, "All right, I agree to your request. You must immediately establish a master and servant contract with me, or I'll kill you immediately." Lu Dragon Gilbert suddenly panicked when these words left his mouth. He opened his mouth and quickly chanted the secret language of the dragon race. A strange power then surged from Gilbert's body into Han Shuo's mind. Han Shuo could feel that he and this Lu Dragon seemed to have formed a mysterious connection in that instant. "Master, I'm your servant now. Please help me find beauties?" Lu Dragon Gilbert bared his teeth and cried out loudly, making a request to Han Shuo. I haven't found any myself, just wait for me. Han Shuo said nonchalantly. Chapter 146. How can you be like this? You can't be like this. Gilbert yelled loudly, his voice rumbling far and wide. All right, we'll talk about this later. Heal your wounds first. Han Shuo casually brushed it off as he inwardly felt the mental fluctuations from just now. After the lewd dragon Gilbert and Han Shuo had formed a contract, a mysterious connection had formed between the two. According to the power of the contract, Han Shuo could sense Gilbert's location even with his eyes closed. In addition, Han Shuo knew that Han Shuo could completely control the life and death of the lewd dragon Gilbert with the power of the contract. Amidst Gilbert's yells, Little Skull appeared in front of Han Shuo with the strange bow in his hand. When the little lewd dragon Gilbert saw Little Skull appear with the bow in his hand, he instinctively felt the aura and abruptly dodged to Han Shuo's side in a panic. Since the bow had appeared, it meant that the dark elf wielding the bow was done for. Taking the bow from Little Skull's hands, Han Shuo held it in his hand and felt it for a bit. He didn't find anything out of the ordinary. After a closer look, he discovered that the entire bow was a dark brown color, like the bark of an old tree. It was full of mysterious, complicated, and strange patterns. Emissary, the matriarch of the Dark Elves, Dana, and a third of the Dark Elves have escaped. The old priest walked to Han Shuo's side and spoke respectfully after hearing the return of the troll leader. Nodding, Han Shuo first put the strange bow into his space ring before saying, "In the underground world, the Dark Elves are very familiar with the surrounding terrain. They are the masters of this place, so it's not strange that they could use the terrain to escape. In order to prevent the Dark Elves from returning for revenge, we need to leave the underground world as soon as possible. Otherwise, if Dana colludes with the other Dark Elf families to attack us, then we'll be in big trouble." "Master, are you returning to the world above ground?" "Oh, that's great. I've never left the underground world before. Now I can finally see the outside world." When Gilbert heard that Han Shuo and the others were going to return to the surface world, he became very excited and cheered happily. Looking at Gilbert strangely, Han Shuo asked with a frown, "Have you always lived in the underground world?" "Oh, right, how did you become enemies with the Dark Forest?" It's nothing much. I snuck out from the Black Dragon City in the underground world. Then I got lost and kept trying to go up. Then I met the lizardmen. They treated me as an honored guest and promised to bring me out of the underground world. They even promised to find me beautiful women and treasures. Then I helped them destroy the Dark Elf family's village. However, when I went to destroy the village that the Dark Elves lived in, I discovered that the Dark Elven maidens were very beautiful. It was a pity that the maidens who threw themselves at me immediately turned hostile and started attacking me. I was injured and fled back to the swamp. You know what happened next." Gilbert looked innocently at Han Shuo and began to narrate what had happened. His words were confusing and unclear, leaving many things unsaid. However, Han Shuo could more or less understand Gilbert's meaning and was too lazy to ask for more details. He nodded and instructed, "Are your injuries serious?" "They're serious." The little lewd dragon drooped his head and said dejectedly. He paused and then said, "But I can slowly recover if I have some time to recuperate. The most important thing is that the damage from that strange arrow is a bit hard to bear. I really don't know how such a weak being could shoot such a powerful arrow." With a slap, Han Shuo slapped Gilbert's jet-black head and said, "Idiot, didn't you see that dark elf die immediately after shooting that arrow? It'd be strange if this kind of evil arrow that expends life force wasn't powerful enough. Don't think that you're amazing just because you're big." Crying out in pain, Gilbert rubbed the head that Han Shuo had slapped and complained, "I'm injured now. Even if we're master and servant, you can't mistreat me." After thinking for a moment, Han Shuo took out the Medusa's essence blood and gave it to the little lewd dragon Gilbert. He said, "This is the Medusa's essence blood and has miraculous effects on injuries. It'll definitely be of great benefit to your injuries. Use it sparingly and don't waste it." "Oh, great master, I praise you." Gilbert couldn't see for the time being because his eyes were injured, But when he heard that the Medusa's essence blood could heal injuries, he flattered Han Shuo and waved his hands about, finally obtaining the small bottle that contained the Medusa's essence blood. Bring my palanquin over to carry this blind dark dragon. We need to leave the underground world as soon as possible. Otherwise, we'll be in great trouble when Dana finds dark elves from other families. Han Shuo looked at the old priest in the distance and gave his orders. The old priest also understood the dangers of the current situation and gave a few instructions to the troll leader in the distance. 2 palanquins were carried over, one comfortably large for the little skull, while the other was a bit more crude for the little lewd dragon Gilbert. Han Shuo led the way on foot at the very front. It was a good thing that Han Shuo had silently memorized the path along the way. With Han Shuo's current memory and mind, he was able to clearly organize such a complicated path in his mind. They didn't run into any difficulties on the way back under Han Shuo's guidance. The old priest was quite surprised when they entered the passageway and began to advance through the complicated and spacious caves. Emissary, you've only walked the path back once and you've memorized it all? The old priest finally asked curiously after enduring for a long time. Oh, this is all under the instructions of the great goddess Datera. It has nothing to do with me. Han Shuo responded carelessly. The little skull poked his head out of the palanquin after an order was given. He waved his little hand at the old priest and saluted Han Shuo. The old priest was baffled. He didn't know what the little skull's saluting gesture meant, so he immediately praised the little skull. Halfway through the journey, Han Shuo heard many messy footsteps. This made Han Shuo's heart skip a beat. He then urged the forest troll to hurry up and leave the underground world as soon as possible. His bright eyes saw a few strange creatures with lizard heads and human bodies at the end of a cave. When he thought of the conversation between the little lewd dragon Gilbert and the dark elves, he immediately understood that these creatures with lizard heads should be the lizard men of the underground world. However, he didn't know why these lizard men would appear here. There are some lizard men here. Do you know what's going on? Han Shuo snapped his fingers, and a few forest troll warriors carried the little lewd dragon Gilbert to Han Shuo's side. Han Shuo then asked Gilbert, who was inside. Oh, it really is the lizard men. I didn't think that the lizard men would keep their promise. They promised me that they would take me out of the underground world. However, I fell for the dark elves' trick and retreated back to the swamp. I didn't think that they would still be waiting for me. Gilbert cheered and abruptly crawled out of the palanquin. It was unknown if it was due to the effects of the Medusa's essence blood, but Gilbert's bleeding eyes had already returned to normal. Although he was still covered in cuts and bruises and his entire body was black, the blood from his wounds had stopped flowing. The little lewd dragon Gilbert walked out of the palanquin and growled in a deep, thick voice, "Lowly life forms, have you come to pay tribute to me?" The lizard men at the end of the cave suddenly cheered when they heard Gilbert's voice. Dozens of lizard men suddenly appeared from the surrounding caves. A few of the lizard men carried a chest of items and respectfully delivered it to Gilbert's feet. An old lizard man supported himself with a walking stick and said shakily, "Mighty Dark Dragon, we've heard that you've helped us punish the evil dark elves. We've promised you this chest of treasure, please accept it." Gilbert walked over and reached out to open the chest. He discovered that there were all sorts of beautiful crystals sparkling with multicolored light within the chest. This immediately made Gilbert excited and he opened his mouth again. "Then, where are the beauties you promised me?" The old lizard man snapped his fingers and 3 slender and curvaceous female lizard women walked in front of Gilbert. One of them said shyly in the common language, "Honored Dark Dragon, we 3 sisters will definitely serve you well. Please take us with you." Han Shuo laughed loudly and couldn't help but mock as he looked at the little lewd dragon Gilbert's frozen smile with great interest. "Forget it, I'll accept the crystals. You can take these 3 lizard women away, I don't need them." Gilbert grabbed the chest of crystals and escaped from the 3 lizard women. He immediately urged Han Shuo and told Han Shuo to leave as soon as possible. When Gilbert approached, Han Shuo moved like lightning and snatched the chest of beautiful crystals from Gilbert's grasp. He ignored Gilbert's shouts and threw it into his space ring. He then said, "What's yours is mine. I'll take care of it for you, hehe." The group of forest troll then followed the cave they'd entered to the surface world under Han Shua's miraculous memory. Chapter 147. They didn't run into any danger along the way, and Han Shua's party walked out of the underground world safely from the valley they came in from. Although this operation was a little different from the original plan, the final result was still satisfactory. Not only did Han Shua obtain 2 carts of gold and jewels from the Dark Elves, but he also obtained a chest of beautiful crystals, a mysterious bow, and a dark dragon subordinate. Han Shua felt that this trip was very worth it. On the way to the village where the forest troll lived, Dark Dragon Gilbert kept yelling for Han Shua to return the chest of crystals that belonged to him, and for Han Shua to help him find beauties. However, he was heartlessly rejected by Han Shua. In the end, the Dark Dragon knew that he couldn't convince Han Shua, so he stopped wasting his breath and nursed his injuries on his own. Han Shua didn't stay idle either. He took the opportunity to master another intermediate necromancy spell, Dark Mist. This spell could create a mist within a certain range. The caster wouldn't be affected, but the enemy's vision would be blocked. It was a very practical spell for both attack and escape. Han Shua had more or less mastered the art of the demonic ninth heavens by now. After testing it out, he found that other than some problems with the direction, the other problems were solved through continuous practice. It seemed that it wouldn't be long before Han Shua could truly fly in the air. When passing by the holy land of the forest troll, Han Shua had the forest troll wait outside while he and Little Skull went in and stored all the remaining treasures in the holy land into his space ring. This place of extreme wood was still of great use to Han Shua, so Han Shua specifically ordered the forest troll guarding the holy land to pay attention to this area. After returning to the village, Han Shua found traces of an intense battle outside the village. After entering the village and listening to the old priest's narration, Han Shua learned that the forest trolls had rushed in from all directions after they'd left and fought with the attacking elves. In the end, when the elves saw that the forest trolls were superior in numbers, they retreated dejectedly after losing a few elves. As the god that the forest troll worshipped, Little Skull was worshipped by all the forest troll tribes. Han Shua ordered the old priest to take away all the luxury items that the McGrady Chamber of Commerce had. He then used the excuse of inspecting the targets to rob and left the forest troll with Little Skull and the lewd dragon Gilbert. After a few days of walking, Han Shua appeared in the Cemetery of Death. Because of the contract, Han Shua didn't mind Gilbert and brought him into the cemetery. When Gilbert discovered that Han Shua actually possessed the Cemetery of Death, a string of flattery poured out of his mouth, praising Han Shua to the point where he was on cloud 9. "Alright, stay in the Cemetery of Death for now to recuperate. I'll come find you directly if I have any orders." Han Shua didn't care about Gilbert's shouts. After giving him this order, he left the Cemetery of Death through the transportation matrix and returned to the capital of the empire, Asen City. As soon as he walked out of the Cemetery of Death, Han Shua discovered the mark that Emily had left behind. This cave was where Han Shua entered and exited the Cemetery of Death. It was a place where the transportation matrix was placed. Apart from Han Shua, only Emily knew about it. From the message that Emily had left behind, Han Shua knew that Emily had looked for him. She wanted him to go to the Dark Mantle organization and contact Chester as soon as possible after returning from the Cemetery of Death. After putting away the transportation rod that was placed in the transportation matrix, Han Shua didn't return to the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force. Instead, he headed straight for the Dark Mantle stronghold. "Oh, you finally appeared. Madam Emily has already looked for you many times. I've also gone to your academy to look for you, but I didn't find any traces of you. Madam Emily told me to stay here and said that you'd contact me. I didn't think that you'd actually appear." The bandit Chester had magically walked out when Han Shua appeared in the Dark Mantle stronghold. He started yelling loudly when he saw Han Shua. "Emily is in such a hurry to see me. Has something happened?" Han Shua asked in astonishment when he saw Chester's anxious appearance. Nodding and then shaking his head, Chester said with a wry face, "Something must have happened, but Madam Emily didn't tell me the specifics." "Then what did Emily tell you?" Han Shuo knew that there were some things that Emily would only tell him and that Chester had no right to know. Therefore, he asked about Emily's instructions for Chester. "Leave the capital with me immediately. We need to hurry to Valen City." "Madam, Emily should have already gone there by now," Chester said, and then added, "Madam, Emily told me to contact her through the organization when I take you to Valen City. She'll explain everything to you in detail then." "Then let's go." Han Shuo nodded in agreement. Valen City was on the western border of the empire and was separated from the Kasi Empire by the Kurlan Grand Canyon. The empire's Griffin Legion was stationed there to defend the Kasi Empire. Only when it was time to take action did Han Shuo realize the Dark Mantle's power. Han Shuo and Chester used the Dark Mantle's transportation matrix within the Dark Mantle headquarters and directly descended into Valen City. As soon as the two appeared in Valen City, they contacted the members of the Dark Mantle's stronghold and told them about their mission with Emily. When the member in charge heard that the two were following Emily on a mission, he immediately prepared a carriage and set off for a hotel. Valen City's land was barren and the entire city would be in a hurry every time there was a war with the Kasi Empire. After many years of war, the already poor Valen City became even poorer. Many of the local residents had migrated to other places and the ones who stayed behind did some military-related business. Han Shuo saw Emily, whom he hadn't seen in a long time, in an extremely large hotel. Emily lived alone in a simple yet elegant room and was furiously scribbling something at this moment. Emily was quite happy when she saw Han Shuo appear, but her expression turned serious when she saw Chester following behind him. She said to Chester, "Chester, wait outside. I have some things to discuss with him." Chester didn't show any displeasure as he respectfully bowed and retreated. He stood outside like a guard, helping Han Shuo and Emily stand guard in case anyone else interrupted their conversation. "I've already given orders to the forest troll. They'll definitely be able to acquire the siege equipment as long as someone goes over to purchase it." Han Shuo walked directly towards Emily after he entered and spoke next to the burning stove. "Our target this time is the Griffin Legion. According to our deductions, the chief of the Griffin Legion has the intention of rebelling. What I need to do is gather evidence." Emily didn't continue to hide anything and immediately revealed their objective this time. Han Shuo was startled, then couldn't help but feel delighted. As the sons of the chief of the Griffin Legion, Claude and Clark had long since formed a deep grudge against him. Claude had died by his hands and Clark had tried to assassinate him not too long ago. It looked like he could take advantage of this mission to get rid of Clark as well. The chief of a legion is rebelling. What's the purpose of this? Although he was overjoyed, Han Shuo didn't forget about proper business and asked in puzzlement. "His Majesty's health is getting worse and worse. The two princes can't be placed in an important position and neither of them can obtain His Majesty's true trust. The chief of the Griffin Legion holds a large number of soldiers. Last time, he had some unknown intentions and begged His Majesty to marry the princess to his son Clark. His Majesty refused in the end. Afterwards, the Dark Mantle sensed that his actions were a bit suspicious, as if they were connected to the Kasi Empire. Our objective is to gather as much evidence as we can. As long as we have enough evidence, my brother will personally take action and arrest the chief of the Griffin Legion." Emily looked at Han Shuo and explained. "Then what should we do next?" Emily was most familiar with many of the details. Han Shuo's knowledge of this mission was limited and so he wouldn't rashly express any opinions. He asked Emily honestly, "Since you've already passed on the order to the forest troll, I think that the siege equipment that was stolen from Mediv will appear in Valen City before long. The chief of the Griffin Legion won't make a move in the short term, but according to our Dark Mantle's observations, a storm seems to be brewing in the Empire. The Kasi Empire is eyeing the Empire like a tiger watching its prey and seems to be waiting for His Majesty's death to attack our Empire without restraint. This batch of siege equipment may have been prepared by the chief of the Griffin Legion, Bob Asher, when he plans to attack the palace. As long as we can discover this batch of siege equipment in their house, we can arrest them before they start their rebellion." Emily looked at Han Shuo and explained. "His son, Clark, is currently not in Valen City. I want to kill him first. Han Shuo suddenly said lowly after listening to Emily's explanation. Emily started when she heard these words. She didn't seem to have thought that Han Shuo would know Clark and hold such great hatred for him. Chapter 148. No matter how you incurred his enmity, Clark is an Earthrider, you can't act rashly. Emily couldn't help but remind Han Shuo worriedly when she saw Han Shuo's killing intent. Nodding with a faint smile, Han Shuo comforted Emily, "Don't worry, I'm not a rash person. If I didn't have absolute certainty, I would never make a move against him." Emily finally relaxed after Han Shuo's words and said to Han Shuo, "I'm not too sure if Clark is in Valen City right now. I've heard that he's about to return, but I haven't received any news yet. I'll tell you if Clark really does return to Valen City, but Valen City is the territory of the Griffin Legion, you must be extremely careful." "Understood, what should we do next?" Han Shuo asked Emily. Grabbing a fur coat from a nearby chair and putting it on, Emily stood up and straightened her clothes, saying to Han Shuo, "I'll take you to a place and see if we can gather anything." Emily stood up and looked at herself in the mirror as she straightened her clothes. At this moment, Han Shuo's heart stirred as he recalled some of the jewels he'd obtained from the forest troll Holy Land. He couldn't help but take out a large necklace made of red agate and walked gently behind Emily, helping Emily put it on her fair neck. On her snow-white, beautiful neck, there was an additional ruby necklace that shone with a faint halo. It made Emily's beauty stand out even more, adding a bit of grace and nobility to her temperament. Although Emily's status was noble and she'd seen all kinds of jewels before, the meaning of this red agate necklace was naturally different when Han Shuo gently helped her put it on. Thus, when Han Shuo gently helped her put on the red agate necklace, Emily's eyes sparkled as she looked very happy. "Bad brat, you know how to please people now." Emily smiled and hugged Han Shuo tightly. She took the initiative to give Han Shuo a kiss. Then, she reached out to wipe the kiss mark on Han Shuo's lips and walked out of the room. When she walked out of the room, her expression returned to normal. She instructed Chester, "Go and prepare a carriage. We need to go somewhere." "It is my pleasure to serve you," Chester said respectfully, and walked away dutifully. When Emily and Han Shuo walked out of the inn, Chester's carriage had also been found. Han Shuo and Emily sat inside, while Chester and the coachman sat outside. Under Emily's instructions, they headed south of Valen City. Half an hour later, the carriage stopped in front of a spacious house. There were many luxurious carriages parked in front of the house. There were some valiant swordsmen standing in front of the door, broadswords in hand. All sorts of warriors in metal armor patrolled the house. It looked like the security was very tight. Emily didn't say much, and Han Shuo didn't ask either. When they reached the door, Emily flashed a card and the two guards at the door immediately let them pass. Emily led Han Shuo and Chester into the house. After passing through a cobblestone corridor, the three entered a spacious hall. The interior of the hall was abnormally bright, and there were a dozen or so large furnaces burning in the surroundings, making the entire hall seem very warm. There were many metal cages in the surroundings, with all sorts of male and female slaves within. Some of the male slaves were tall and strong, looking like they were made for hard labor. The female slaves were more beautiful, wearing very little clothing, and their exposed skin was full of temptation. Many well-dressed men and women were pointing at the slaves in the cages in the hall, pulling over smiling slave traders to discuss the price. Many of them were wearing military uniforms, and from the griffin insignia on their shoulders, it was clear that they were members of the Empire's Griffin Legion. This is the largest slave trading house in Valen City, and the master behind the scenes is the Griffin Legion's commander, Bobby Asher. If you look at the guards around you, you'll see that they all have a strict sense of discipline. They're clearly regular soldiers in the army. Although they've taken off their uniforms, it's hard to change their temperament, Emily explained to Han Shuo in a low voice as she pretended to look around. Han Shuo's heart jumped when he heard Emily's words, and he couldn't help but open his mouth in astonishment. The Empire has clear rules that all officials and nobles are not allowed to participate in the slave trade. This Bobby Asher actually dares to do this? In Valen City, Bobby Asher is the local tyrant. Many people know that he's the master behind the scenes of the largest slave trading house. Even His Majesty is aware of this. However, because Bobby Asher has made great contributions to the empire, His Majesty has turned a blind eye to his actions when he didn't have any intentions of rebelling. But now that some of Bobby Asher's actions have jeopardized the interests of the empire, we can't sit idly by. As long as we can gather evidence of this largest slave trading house in Valen City, we can also use it as an excuse to arrest Bobby Asher. Emily's eyes darted around as she slowly moved closer to Han Shua's ear and explained. Chester, who'd come in with the two, was a bit taken aback when he saw that Emily's attitude towards Han Shua was so intimate. However, as a qualified member of the Dark Mantle, Chester naturally knew that there were some things that he had to pretend he hadn't seen, even if he saw them. Therefore, when Emily noticed his gaze, Chester hastily lowered his head. When he lifted his head again, his expression had returned to normal. However, when he looked at Han Shua, his gaze revealed surprise, admiration, and even a bit of envy. The slaves here aren't good enough. I'll take you to see better goods. Maybe you can pick one that you like and take her back as a servant girl or something. When the two guards walked towards Han Shua and Emily, Emily suddenly raised her voice and reached out to pull Han Shua, making their way through the hall to another room. When they reached the door, Emily once again flashed the card. The guard at the door checked it and respectfully let them in, saying, "Beautiful madam, I hope you'll be able to obtain a slave that you'll be satisfied with." Giggling delicately, Emily turned around and nodded at Han Shua, then said with a smile, "Come in." There was a somewhat dim corridor inside. The floor was covered with a soft red carpet, and glass lamps hung high above. There were scrolls of paintings on the walls of the corridor, and there was a guard standing guard every 10 steps. After walking for a minute, the three entered a ring-shaped auction hall. This auction hall was very lavishly decorated, like a movie theater. There were ordinary seats, as well as some small rooms for VIPs. When Emily arrived, she walked into a small room on the left and exchanged a few words with the person inside. She swiped her crystal card and was respectfully led by a guard to the room above. As soon as Han Shua came in, he heard the clamor of bids. An extremely valiant barbarian was imprisoned in a cage. He let out a beast-like roar, and the people below raised their cards one after another to bid on this valiant barbarian. Some nobles like to fight. They will choose their own gladiators to have a private competition, and the competition will end with the death of one of the gladiators. That's why they come here to choose some powerful slaves, because slaves are the most convenient and worry-free. When Emily brought Han Shua and Chester to the room above, she calmly explained to Han Shua. Han Shua nodded to show that he understood. When he walked into the room, he saw that there was a bidding sign. Han Shua glanced at it and saw that there was a simple magic device. As long as he moved the magic device, the amount of the bid would be displayed in front of the door of the room. It was very convenient. Some people have noble statuses or avoid certain things, and don't want others to discover that they are in this place. Therefore, there is a need for these kinds of rooms that can conceal their bodies and see the outside, but those outside cannot see the people inside. When they arrived, Emily's eyes sparkled as she observed the people on the stage and below. She explained to Han Shua faintly, "I'm sure that the guests of Valen City below will recognize the next person up for auction. She is the young miss of the Addison family of Valen City." The matter of the Addison family colluding with the Kasi Empire was discovered by the wise commander of the Griffin Legion. The Addison family was completely destroyed a few days ago, and all the traitors were executed. The young miss of the Addison family was reduced to a slave. Haha, this unruly young miss was once very famous in Valen City. Her breasts are now very full, and she's still a virgin. I'm sure that everyone below will be very interested in this unruly young miss of Valen City. An organizer dressed in formal attire on the stage explained with a smile, arousing the curiosity of those below. He then suddenly raised his arm and shouted, "Miss Lisa of the Addison family. Oh, little Lisa is no longer a young miss, but a female slave that you will take home and indulge in. The starting price is 300 gold coins. Begin the auction." A cage was slowly lowered from above as soon as he finished speaking. A teary-eyed Lisa appeared in Han Shua's field of vision. She wore a sensual muslin dress, and her voluptuous breasts were bulging. Chapter 149. Han Shua was startled when he saw Lisa appear in the cage, and his originally unintentional gaze became a bit severe. Han Shua had once harbored hatred towards Lisa, but as the two slowly interacted with each other, Han Shua discovered that Lisa wasn't that bad after all. She'd even protected him in every way, and this had unwittingly changed Han Shua's opinion of Lisa. Lisa's eyes were filled with tears as her originally bright eyes were now dim and devoid of light, revealing a kind of helplessness and despair. This made Han Shua's heart ache greatly. Does the Addison family have some sort of enmity with Bob Asher? Why was the Addison family suddenly destroyed by Bob and accused of treason? Han Shua's gaze was cold as he looked around and asked Emily. Emily had felt that something was off about Han Shua when Lisa had first appeared. She couldn't help but ask when she heard Han Shua's question, "You seem to care a lot about this Lisa?" Nodding, Han Shua turned to look at Emily and explained, "Lisa is my classmate in the necromancy major at the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force. She has a good relationship with me and has helped me many times in the past. Now that Lisa has fallen to such a state, I absolutely can't stand by and watch her die." Emily was startled when she heard Han Shua's words and then explained to Han Shua, "Lisa is my classmate in the necromancy major at the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force. She has a good relationship with me and has helped me many times. Now that Lisa has fallen to such a state, I absolutely can't stand by and watch her die." Emily was startled when she heard Han Shua's words and then explained to Han Shua, "The Addison family wasn't on good terms with Bob Asher when he didn't have any intentions of rebelling. Because the Addison family still had some status in Valen City, Bob Asher didn't dare act recklessly. From the information we've received from the Dark Mantle, Bob Asher has been using all sorts of excuses to do so. Little Lisa's figure is impressive, but I have to remind you that she's still a necromancer. You can't take off the anti-massage bracelet she's wearing." The organizer was still describing Lisa's situation. Some of the bidders below showed great interest in Lisa and the price of the auction soared. From the base price of 300 gold coins, it had already risen to 600 gold coins, a full doubling. When Brian was sold to the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force as a slave by his uncle, he was only worth 5 gold coins. Who would have thought that Lisa's price would be so high, more than 100 times higher than Brian's? It seemed that everyone was very interested in the once unruly Lisa. In the beginning, only a few people below participated in the auction, but as time went on, more and more people began to bid. Lisa's bid continued to climb from 600 gold coins to 700 gold coins. Han Shua observed all of this with a cold eye and suddenly reached out to activate the magical device, calling out a price of 1,000 gold coins. The noisy hall immediately quieted down when the price of 1,000 gold coins appeared in front of Han Shua's box. Everyone's gazes involuntarily looked at the box that Han Shua and the others were in with astonishment. It's just a female slave, how can she be worth 1,000 gold coins? People will notice us if you do this. Emily was a bit puzzled as she looked at Han Shua. I must save this woman. There's no need to dilly-dally and slowly raise the price. A high price will make more people shrink back. Han Shua looked at the lifeless Lisa in the cage and opened his mouth to speak. As soon as Han Shua's high bid appeared, the group of bidders who had just been brimming with excitement stopped their bidding in embarrassment. A female slave that could be brought back to play with wouldn't be worth 1,000 gold coins no matter what. Although Lisa's status in Valen City had once been noble and was a bit tempting to them, 1,000 gold coins wasn't a small sum after all. Disregarding Lisa's status, a slave of the same beauty would only be worth 50 gold coins at most. Therefore, when Han Shua called out the high price of 1,000 gold coins, the organizer called out 3 times and very straightforwardly called out, "Congratulations, bidder number 83. You only need to swipe your crystal card in the box and transfer 1,000 gold coins to our slave shop. Little Lisa is yours." To the current Han Shua, 1,000 gold coins wasn't a large sum at all. Han Shua's spoils of war were worth tens of thousands of gold coins in his recent trip to the Dark Forest. Therefore, Han Shuo didn't even crease his brow at the price of 1,000 gold coins. He directly took out his crystal card and planned on swiping it in the notch in the box. Suddenly stopping Han Shuo, Emily moved Han Shuo's hand to the side and said, "Let me do it. If you use your crystal card, it'll leave the name on your crystal card account in the slave shop. Although the slave shop will keep this a secret, Bob Asher can easily find out your account name if he wants to investigate you." Han Shuo thought for a bit after Emily's words and felt that it made sense. He opened his mouth and said, "All right, I'll transfer 1,000 gold coins to your crystal card number and then you can use a secure crystal card to pay for it." To Emily, she hadn't planned on letting Han Shuo do this. 1,000 gold coins wasn't much to Emily. But when Emily was about to help Han Shuo pay, she noticed Chester's gaze on the side. Her thoughts spun slightly and Emily still nodded and agreed to Han Shuo's suggestion. She transferred 1,000 gold coins from Han Shuo's crystal card to another crystal card she'd prepared and then paid for Lisa. A few elven slaves, 2 orc fox girls, and a very strong berserker were auctioned off later on. Han Shuo's group didn't continue to make a move and observed everything with cold eyes. "We can come in late at night next time to investigate. Since you're participating in the auction today, let's not walk around randomly." Emily explained the layout of the entire slave shop to Han Shuo in detail as the auction continued, including some things that should be taken note of. She only said this to Han Shuo in the end. Nodding in agreement, Han Shuo, Emily, and Chester walked out of the box and were about to take Lisa away when the sharp-eyed Han Shuo saw someone suddenly enter the door. He suddenly stopped and gestured towards Emily, saying in a low voice, "You and Chester, go get Lisa first. I have some matters to attend to." Han Shuo's body moved quickly after he'd finished speaking and made his way through the crowd with large strides. He abruptly appeared in front of the door and approached Lawrence, who just appeared. However, before Han Shuo could approach Lawrence, 2 people suddenly appeared next to Lawrence. The 2 took a step forward, one on the left and one on the right, looking warily at Han Shuo. Lawrence finally noticed Han Shuo at this time. He first looked at Han Shuo with surprise and then turned back to call out to the 2, beckoning to Han Shuo. When Han Shuo appeared in front of Lawrence, Lawrence asked Han Shuo with great surprise, "Brian, what are you doing in Valen City?" "I have some matters to attend to." "Right, what are you doing here?" Han Shuo asked. His face abruptly froze. Lawrence said in a cold voice, "Something happened to my cousin's family. Even Lisa has been framed and reduced to a slave. I heard that she's going to be auctioned off here, so I've come to save my cousin." Lisa was related to the Lawrence family, so it looked like Lawrence must have known about the Addison family's matters. That's why he'd come all the way here from the capital. This made Han Shuo's opinion of Lawrence rise a notch. He hadn't thought that this person would place so much importance on family. According to the ways of the world, there was a limit to how close a cousin's relationship could be. Bob Asher had accused the Odysseus family of treason. Such a serious crime would cause all the relatives to shrink back, because one wrong move could bring trouble upon themselves. Han Shuo already had a whole new level of respect for Lawrence that he'd come all the way here from 1,000 miles away. Lawrence's sincerity had already made Han Shuo look at him in a new light. "You're a step too late. Lisa has already been auctioned off for 1,000 gold coins." Han Shuo looked at Lawrence and smiled faintly. "It must be that old dog Calvert. Lisa's family has never been on good terms with his family, and he was the one who started the matter with Lisa's family this time. He'll definitely be willing to spend a great deal of money to buy Lisa back and torture her." Lawrence's face was cold as he suddenly spoke to the 2 behind him. "It looks like we're going to be robbers who commit murder and arson today." The 2 behind Lawrence were expressionless and wore very ordinary, loose clothes. It was impossible to make out anything from their attire, and only when Han Shuo calmed his senses did he discover that one was a swordsman and the other a mage. However, Han Shuo couldn't sense their exact strength. "How could I let Lisa be auctioned off by someone else since I'm here? Don't worry, Lisa is in my hands." Han Shuo had already determined from Lawrence's face that Lawrence was truly concerned about Lisa, so he spoke with a slight smile. Lawrence heaved a sigh of relief when he heard these words and then said sincerely to Han Shuo, "Brian, I owe you a favor. Chapter 150. You don't owe me anything. Lisa and I can be considered friends in the academy. This is what I should do. As Han Shuo spoke, he saw Emily and Chester walking out with Lisa, who was wrapped in a black robe. Let's leave this place first. Lawrence followed Han Shuo's gaze and noticed Emily and Chester's movements. His eyes suddenly lit up as he spoke softly and turned to leave. There were some procedures to enter the slave trading house, but they weren't so strict when leaving. Han Shuo and Lawrence didn't encounter any obstructions behind Emily and Chester as they left. Emily was escorted by 2 guards from the slave trading house. When they arrived at the door, Emily waved her hand and the 2 respectfully retreated. When they arrived at the side of the carriage, Emily was a bit surprised to see Lawrence appear. Han Shuo's expression was relatively calm as he said to Lawrence, I met Madame Emily when I was at your house last time. I've come to Valen City this time under Madame Emily's orders to do some things for her. Lawrence obviously knew some things, but didn't say anything. He smiled amiably at Han Shuo. These are your matters, you don't need to tell me anything. I think we should first take a look at my cousin. Lifting the curtains of the carriage, Han Shuo and Lawrence walked in. The 2 had just entered when a teary-eyed Lisa threw herself into Han Shuo's arms and sobbed, Brian, they killed my entire family. My father, mother, and grandfather were all killed. Lisa was heartbreakingly weak at this moment. Han Shuo patted Lisa's shoulder lightly and said in a low voice, You're safe now, those people will be punished. Hugging Han Shuo tightly, Lisa seemed to use all of her strength, but also to prove the reality of this moment. She bit down on her pinky finger and cried out in pain, I'm not dreaming, I'm still alive, I want revenge, I want to kill those cruel people. Lisa, who had always been unruly and fierce in the academy, had suddenly changed after experiencing the tragedy of her life. The naivety on her face was replaced by hatred, as if revenge was the courage to continue living in this moment. Lisa, what happened? Tell me in detail, I'll take revenge for you. Lawrence's eyes blossomed with a frosty light as he looked at the crying Lisa and asked in a low voice. It was only at this moment that Lisa seemed to notice that there was another person in the carriage apart from Han Shuo. Lisa wiped away the tears in her eyes, and when she opened her eyes and saw Lawrence, she once again sobbed bitterly, Brother Lawrence, I'm not too sure what happened, but Father said that my mother was sick and told me to go home and visit her. When I returned to Valen City, Father told me that there might be danger at home. Mother wasn't sick, but he didn't let me go home either. Then the next day, Calvert, that lackey of the Griffin Legion, rushed into our home with his men and started killing and capturing people everywhere. Apart from me, everyone else died, all of them were killed, whoa. Don't worry, I'll take revenge for you. Lawrence promised Lisa with a cold expression. Help me kill Calvert? You have to help me kill him. Lisa cried out helplessly. She first looked at Lawrence, and then stared at Han Shuo with a mournful gaze. A complete family, all of her relatives killed in an instant. This was too much of a shock for Lisa, and it made the usually unruly Lisa reveal a pitiful, weak, and helpless appearance. I'll help you. Lisa's gaze made Han Shuo silent for a while, and then he nodded in agreement. If you want to kill Calvert, we need to discuss this properly. Emily suddenly called out in a low voice from outside the carriage, and then stuck her head out to look at Han Shuo and Lawrence, saying, At the very least, we need to leave this place first. Lisa, come with me. Lawrence climbed out of the carriage and nodded at the 2 people standing indifferently on the side. The swordsman of the 2 left and soon brought over another carriage. Lawrence dragged Lisa inside, and the coachman swung the reins, and the carriage slowly started moving. Follow him. Han Shuo instructed Chester outside, and then turned to look apologetically at Emily, saying, Perhaps it's a bit different from your plan, but I have to do this. I understand you, and killing Calvert was our original goal as well. This isn't much different from our plan. We've got some extra help, haven't we? Emily smiled in understanding and then said with a bit of seriousness, This Lawrence seems to be the son of the Empire's finance minister. However, the strength of the 2 behind him isn't bad. In addition, Lawrence's behavior seems to be a bit strange. How do you know this person? Do you know his background? Shaking his head, Han Shuo hesitated for a moment before replying. Lord Candide told me that Lawrence's identity wasn't simple. He said that if I got too close to him, I might get into trouble. However, I've been in contact with Lawrence for a while and feel that this person should be quite reliable. If that old fox Candide knows Lawrence's identity, but didn't tell you, then this means that Lawrence's identity is definitely not that simple. It looks like I'll have to ask my brother. Emily frowned and spoke with some confusion. Suddenly, at a corner, Lawrence's carriage stopped. Lawrence poked his head out and waited until Han Shuo and Emily's carriage was next to his. He spoke, Brian, I think this matter isn't directly related to Madame Emily. If you have her best interests at heart, it's best that you don't involve her in this. Han Shuo started and exchanged a look with Emily in the carriage. Emily frowned and thought for a while before speaking to Han Shuo. Go with them and see what they're up to. Come find me at the Dark Mantle Stronghold when you come back. I'll go back and investigate Lawrence's background. Nodding at Emily, Han Shuo walked out of Emily's carriage and walked towards Lawrence's carriage. He said with a smile, You're so thoughtful. Madame Emily really doesn't need to involve herself in this. I'm very sorry, Madame Emily, but you know that I'm doing this for your own good. ASCII fears no one in Valen City. Even with your status, there are some things that you can't interfere with. Lawrence called out softly to the carriage that Emily was in and then instructed the people in front, Let's go. After Han Shuo entered, Lisa seemed to have stabilized her emotions after Lawrence's persuasion. Lawrence didn't say much when Lisa was in the carriage, his expression dark and his thoughts unknown. At this moment, Han Shuo didn't know what to say to Lisa either and was also silent the entire way. The carriage stopped in front of a house and Lawrence said softly to Lisa, Get off the carriage and stay in that house. Brian and I are going out to take care of some matters and we'll be back soon. Don't worry, you'll be very safe in that house. Lisa was much more obedient than usual after experiencing such a tragic disaster. She nodded obediently and allowed Lawrence to get off the carriage. Lawrence knocked on the door and a person walked out. This person was hidden in the shadows and Han Shuo immediately discovered that he was the expert that had spied on Clark. Send her in and have the people inside protect her. You're coming with me. Lawrence instructed and returned to the carriage. After Lisa had gone in, the person walked out and entered the carriage after a while. He sat down silently in front of Han Shuo and Lawrence, not saying a word. When they met face to face, Han Shuo took a closer look and found that this person looked very ordinary. Han Shuo didn't find anything special about his face. However, this person was able to follow the Earth Rider Clark without being discovered. This was enough to show that his strength wasn't ordinary. He's called Lucky and is an assassin. The two people outside with the coachman are the senior swordsman Divak and the Earth Adept Mage Adelo. We're going to kill Calvert now. Lawrence introduced them to Han Shuo and then said that they were going to kill Calvert. What's your plan? Han Shuo was silent for a moment and then asked. Calvert is the loyal lackey of the Griffin Legion's leader, Bob Asher, and is in charge of food distribution in Valen City. He was originally an officer of the Griffin Legion and was originally an senior knight of 43 years old. He only had one son, Calvert, who once tried to rape Lisa. In the end, his manhood was cut off by Lisa instead. Thus, the two families formed a deep enmity that is difficult to resolve. As an senior knight, Calvert has more than 10 servants in his house, most of which are soldiers of the Griffin Legion. He's not too hard to deal with. Lawrence slowly said these words, proving that he must have done a detailed investigation beforehand. I've just received news that Clark has already returned to Valen City and seems to have arrived at Calvert's house. He seems to be helping his father pass on some instructions to Calvert. At this moment, the silent assassin Lucky suddenly spoke up. Startled, Lawrence's brows furrowed tightly and he seemed to be hesitant. Han Shuo's heart also jolted as a thick murderous intent appeared on his face. Lawrence's hesitant appearance meant that he was no longer confident because of Clark's appearance. Han Shuo, who had entered the true demon realm, Little Skull, and necromancy magic, dared to face Clark head-on. However, Han Shuo also wasn't confident that he could win against the Earth Rider Clark, so he also remained silent. Uncle Lucky, if you were to assassinate Clark, how confident are you in killing him? After a moment of silence, Lawrence opened his mouth to ask Assassin Lucky. I think only 50%. Lucky replied indifferently. Nodding, Lawrence said, all right, then you'll be the first to assassinate Clark. I believe that with your strength, even if you can't succeed, you'll be able to retreat unscathed. When the time comes, we'll decide if we need to act together based on Clark's physical condition. If I want to leave, Clark definitely won't be able to find me. Lucky responded. I think that if Mr. Lucky and I work together, we can at least increase our chances of success by 30%. Han Shuo looked at Lucky and suddenly spoke. Brian, are you sure that you won't be discovered and won't affect Uncle Lucky? Lawrence's expression turned serious as he looked gravely at Han Shuo. I think that my participation will be of help to him. If you trust me, I want to act together with him. Han Shuo also spoke seriously as he looked at Lawrence. All right, Uncle Lucky, take him and give it a try. If it doesn't work, give up midway and we'll find another time to act. Lawrence thought for a bit and said to Assassin Lucky. All right. Lucky responded and glanced at Han Shuo, saying, we'll leave from here. If the Calvert residence is on fire, that means we can act. You can directly kill your way in, otherwise don't approach. Don't worry, I know what to do. You guys be careful. Lawrence nodded in agreement. Let's go. Lucky glanced at Han Shuo and his body lightly floated down from the carriage. He leapt onto a 3-meter-tall roof without making a sound. Han Shuo took a deep breath and circulated his magical yuan after focusing his attention. He used the art of the demonic ninth heavens, and also leapt into the air. His body flew up a bit higher than Lucky's jump and also landed soundlessly next to Lucky. Lucky turned back to look at Han Shuo in astonishment. The lips on his apathetic face twitched slightly as he said faintly, not bad, perhaps you really can help me a bit. The old assassin Lucky didn't continue to look at Han Shuo after he'd finished speaking. His body nimbly shuttled through the night streets and rooftops, drifting like a wandering ghost. Han Shuo greatly admired the agility of this person's body. However, Han Shuo's magical yuan had reached the true demon realm. His body's agility and flexibility were also outstanding. Using his extraordinary senses, Han Shuo followed closely behind Lucky and didn't fall behind at all. Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, Martial World, and tales of demons and gods.